All right, so you're planning your holidays. You're thinking maybe Disney, and you're thinking Florida. You're thinking Orlando, but you're not thinking all of the lines, all of the waiting, all of the shuttling, all of the crowds, all of the extra payments for meals. You're not thinking all of that stuff. What you're wondering is there any magic? You thought Disney was supposed to be magical. Well, I've got some itineraries for you. Hey, welcome to This is the Cruise. I'm Clint, and this is the channel where we look at upcoming cruise itineraries and try to figure out if this is the cruise for you. Today, we are looking at holiday cruises in 2024 from Port Canaveral on Disney. In part one, we looked at Fort Lauderdale, Disney cruises from Fort Lauderdale. In part two, we looked at Disney cruises from Galveston. In part three, we went all the way to the other side of the world and looked at Disney cruises from Sydney and Auckland. And here we're returning to the mother port, as it were, right outside of Orlando in Port Canaveral, where you could, in theory, go to Disney World, experience Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, all of the things, right? Animal Kingdom, oh, can't forget, one of my favorites, I almost forgot. So you could do that. And then you could actually get some relaxation in, you could get on a ship and you could cruise and really celebrate the holidays in style. So why Disney? And I've mentioned this in parts 1, 2, and 3. Disney really has a magic about how they're able to anticipate what you need even when you didn't know you needed it. That's something that really other entertainment companies and hospitality companies and cruise lines really can't do the way Disney does. So when my son was little, he was petrified of anybody in a costume. He would start crying, he would hide, he was so afraid. And we really wanted to take the family to Disney World. So we did, knowing that he was going to always sort of be sneaking away from the characters and from Mickey and all, everybody that he saw. He loved Toy Story, and he really Toy Story and Cars. He loved Cars, but he just, if he thought there was a person in a costume, he couldn't do it. Well, we're walking through the park one day, and there's Jessie from Toy Story. If you've not seen the movie, she's a cowgirl, and she's a sweet character, and Jessie's there, and my son Ben just kind of like shies away a little bit. She was done with her picture line and everything, and she just saw this little boy who was looking nervous. And we were thinking, all right, let's kind of move him away so that way he doesn't start crying and we don't have to, try and get that sorted out. So she sees him. And she gets down on her knees at his level in full costume, right? Points at his shirt. He was wearing a car shirt with Lightning McQueen on it, and kind of says, and mimes, "I know him. That's Lightning McQueen. I know Lightning." And Ben kind of looked at her like, you know him? And he just sort of edged over, and she got him right up to her. She took pictures with him. We were able to take pictures. We didn't have to pay for them. I have a new friend. We didn't know we needed that, but I've cherished that memory. And Ben told us afterwards, he said, "You know why I wasn't scared? Because that was the real Jessie." And it was amazing. That just goes to show not only how they're able to anticipate the people that are walking through their experience that they're trying to create and where they're at, they also do such a good job with the details that it becomes so real and magical for these kids. And I just, cherish that memory as a dad. I'm really thankful for Disney for those types of memories. So for these cruises, what are we looking at here? We're looking at cruises that really begin around December 20th and end around January 4th. Looking at the calendar, those are the 2 weeks around the Christmas holiday and New Year's holiday, and that's probably when kids are going to be off school. So I try to narrow it down to just those itineraries. And for this video, for part 4, we're looking at cruises from Cape Canaveral, aka Orlando, if you're searching for them. And that just helps us restrict. Now, it's important to note that cruises that leave December 26th after Christmas Day may not be themed as part of their very maritime holiday cruises. It looks like, based on what I'm seeing, that they all just kind of stop if it doesn't leave on the 25th. If it leaves on the 26th, it's sort of like we're just doing a normal cruise again. The other thing to note is that all of these itineraries are repeated up through kind of starting after the Thanksgiving season, which is late November. If you're not in the US, they start their very maritime itineraries then. And if you're looking, the later the itinerary date, the more expensive it gets. So keep that in mind as we're looking at some of these itineraries. To orient ourselves, let's quickly take a look at where we could go on these itineraries. So as I mentioned, all of these start and end in Port Canaveral. And if you look carefully here at the map, you can see that it is not really connected to Orlando. Orlando's off in the distance. Just be aware of that. If you think you're going to fly into Orlando and have the Fort Lauderdale experience where you just take a quick ride share to the port, it's going to be a little bit more than a quick ride share. The first stop we'll look at here really quickly is Disney's Castaway Cay. This is sort of one of their marquee stops. It's their first private island, and it's a great, fun beach vacation sort of island to stop at. A lot of people love Castaway Cay. Disney is currently working on, for the 2024 cruise season, Disney's Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point, which is on the Bahamas, on one of the main islands. You just know that they're always going to be adding more things to it. So if you're really interested in getting there first, these itineraries may be the right ones for you because it's going to be brand new. And they're also looking at ways to make it more immersive in the Bahamian culture, unlike Castaway Cay, which is really a private island and just sort of like its own Disney experience. Another stop that we could be doing on these itineraries is Nassau, Bahamas, pretty kind of common, popular Bahamas stop. Or we may be going over to Cozumel, which is in Mexico, or the big island off of Mexico, kind of near Cancun. We've been here a bunch. There's so much stuff to do in Cozumel, one of the most popular cruise destinations in the world, really. Or we could be stopping at Georgetown, one of my personal favorites here in the Cayman Islands. There's a lot of great stuff to do in Cayman Islands. We actually went here on our honeymoon. We have lots of great memories from going to the Cayman Islands. We could also potentially stop in Jamaica. That's another island stop here that Disney stops at in their holiday itineraries. One of my personal favorites is San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's got tons of history and a lot of stuff to do in Puerto Rico. So I can always stop in Puerto Rico and find great things to do. Or we may be going over to St. Thomas. If I sound like all of these are my favorites, it's because I do really like cruising the Caribbean a lot. And St. Thomas is one where whenever I see that in an itinerary, I know it's going to be a banger of a stop. It's always great. The nature's great. The snorkeling's great. The water's great. The shopping is great. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to visit. Instead of the US Virgin Islands with St. Thomas, maybe we would stop at the British Virgin Islands in Tortola. This is another potential stop for these itineraries as well. The Virgin Islands are all just wonderful. And finally, Philipsburg and St. Maarten is the last stop that we'll look at here. Very popular cruise destination. This is actually one that I have not been to, but I have family that spent some time here and they just had a blast. Everyone I know that has been to St. Maarten loves it. So these are your potential port stops that we could go to in these itineraries. So now we'll quickly go through them and let's look at what our options are. And we'll start with the 3-day option. There's a 3-night Bahamian cruise from Port Canaveral on the Disney Wish. It goes from Port Canaveral, the next day you're in Nassau, the next day you're in Castaway Cay, and then you cruise home to Port Canaveral. It's before Christmas, so it's a nice way to run up to Christmas. You have Christmas Eve off to get yourself kind of back home and settled. You celebrate Christmas Day with the family and the holidays back. So a really nice little pre-Christmas gift. One of the things to note here with this itinerary that I really like, there are no sea days. It's a short 3-night cruise, but you have no sea days. And in every single one of the itineraries we've looked at in parts 1, 2, and 3, they all had at least one sea day. So that's pretty great for this itinerary. So for variety, we're starting the United States and we go to Bahamas twice. That gives us a Clint's Cruisability variety score of 2. There's no deduction for sea days with this. How great is that? A repeatability score of 6, an adventure score of 6.25, An enrichment score of 2.5, that's because it's kind of closed off. Nassau is really kind of carrying the weight here for this one. A relaxation score of 5.25, and then the ship score on Cruise Critic gets a 5 out of 5. They really rate this ship high, and I don't blame them. This itinerary also gets a novelty bonus because Castaway Cay is a private island. Only Disney goes there, and it is a somewhat desirable cruise of 3. This brings our total score to 30. Not too bad. Actually, that's a great 3-day score. But that really is our only 3-day option. Let's jump to the 4-day itineraries. There's a 4-night Very Maritime Bahamian cruise from Port Canaveral. It leaves on December 23rd through the 27th, and then repeats itself, but it's just the 4-night Bahamian cruise from Port Canaveral on December 30th. You're on the Disney Wish. You'll go from Port Canaveral, you'll have a sea day, then you'll spend a day at Nassau, and then you'll spend a day at Castaway Cay, and then you'll cruise back. You'll notice this is exactly the same as the 3-day. They just added a sea day in there, which was interesting. There are advantages to this itinerary over the 3-day. One, it's a little longer. That's a little nicer vacation, I think. It is okay to have a sea day. It means you're on the ship, you get to do the things on the ship. And if there's any downside to that 3-day, is that the Disney Wish is a newer ship and you don't really get to spend any time on it. It's just kind of your hotel to get you to the next destination. So here, you leave Port Canaveral, then you get a whole day to explore the ship and experience the Disney Wish, which is pretty great. This one, for Clint's cruisability score, for variety, gets a 2. Again, that's because we maintain a 2-to-1 port to sea day ratio, so we don't get any deductions there. There's a repeatability score of 6, adventure score of 6.25, enrichment score of 2.5, and a relaxation score of 5.25, again with the Cruise Critic ship score of 5 out of 5, and the novelty bonus again of 3. This brings our total to 30. So it's the exact same score as the 3-day, which makes sense. We're not losing anything by adding in that extra sea day in this case. Then there is another 4-day itinerary. It's the 4-night Bahamian cruise from Port Canaveral on December 22nd. This leaves on the Disney Fantasy. It goes from Port Canaveral, you have a sea day, then you do go to the new private island, Lookout Key at Lighthouse Point, and then you actually go to the private island of Castaway Cay. So for Clint's cruisability score on this itinerary, we have a variety score of 2, and a repeatability score of 5.5, an adventure score of 6.25, enrichment score of 2.5, relaxation score of 6.75, and the ship score of 4.5, just a tick less than the Disney Wish according to Cruise Critic, and then a novelty bonus of 3 for a total score of 30.5. So I saw someone on social media once post, what's the ideal itinerary length for you? A 3-day, a 4-day, or a 7-day? And I thought to myself, I mean, longer than 7 days, right? Like, for sure. So we've looked at 3, 4, 6-day itineraries in this series, and I think, is there any 7 days out here? Yes, there is. There's a 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise from Port Canaveral, again, on December 29th on the Disney Fantasy. So this is not one of the newer ships. This one leaves from Port Canaveral, has 2 days at sea. Then you go to St. Martin, and then San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then you have a sea day, and you go to Castaway Cay, and then you get back to Port Canaveral. So 3 sea days, 3 stops, which does have 1 or 1.5 too many sea days, but that's okay. It's not a bad itinerary. I just wish there was 1 more stop in there to kind of make this a great itinerary. So for Clint's cruisability score here, it gets a variety score of 3, a repeatability score of 6, an adventure score of 6.25, an enrichment score of 4, the relaxation score of 5.5, with a ship score for the fantasy of 4.5, and a novelty bonus of 3 again. That brings our total to 32.25. Higher score, longer cruise, starting to make sense. I can get behind this one, but there may be some better ones out there. Let's take a look. There's the Disney Treasure Maiden Voyage 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise from Port Canaveral on December 21st. It goes through December 28th. But what makes it the maiden voyage? It's on the brand new Disney treasure that is launching for this cruise season, for the 2024 cruise season. It looks amazing. It's going to be leaving from Port Canaveral. Then you have 2 sea days. Then you go to Tortola, the British Virgin Islands, then St. Thomas and the US Virgin Islands. Then you have a day at sea. You go to Castaway Cay, and then you cruise back to Port Canaveral. Actually, a very similar itinerary to what we just saw on the Disney Fantasy. But the question is, are these better stops? Well, let's take a look. So for Clint's cruisability score for variety, it gets a 3. Same criteria as for the Fantasy. I'm not changing that up. It gets a repeatability score of 7, an adventure score of 6.75, an enrichment score of 3.5. That's a little bit of a dip. That's because San Juan has a lot of enrichment activities to do. Then a relaxation score of 6.5, and then a ship score. So I had to make a judgment call here. I took the average Disney ship score. Now, the newer ships tend to rate at a 5. The older ships tend to rate at a 4 or 4.5. So I gave this one a 4.5 because it has not yet been reviewed. It's not sailed yet. Why am I not giving it a 5? Well, in my experience, and in the experience of many others, you don't necessarily want to be on a ship's earlier voyages. This is the maiden voyage for this ship. And that does pose some potential problems. Things may not be running quite as smoothly as they could be. This is Disney though, and they tend to have their act together really well, but things can maybe be a little bit rough. The service may not be quite as smooth as ships that have been running for a little while. So keep that in mind. So I didn't feel guilty giving this a 4.5 when the Wish, which is a very new ship, has a 5. But there's more options. So let's take a look. There's a 7-night Western Caribbean cruise from Port Canaveral. This leaves December 28th after the Christmas season. This would be the second time the ship's out, if my calculations are correct. Leaves from Port Canaveral. You have a sea day. Then you go to Cozumel, Mexico. Then you go to Grand Cayman. Then you go to Falmouth, Jamaica. Then you have a sea day. Then you go to Castaway Cay. This one, for Clint's cruisability score, gets a variety score of 5. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. There's no loss for sea days. That is about as good as you can get. You're leaving from the US, you go to Mexico, you go to Grand Caymans, you go to Jamaica, and you go to the Bahamas. Castaway Cay is a Bahama island. That's 5 countries that you end up touching throughout your entire voyage. That means you get 5 points with no sea day deductions. And you have 2 days at sea to enjoy the ship, the brand new Disney treasure, which sounds pretty great, right? This is looking pretty nice. A repeatability score of 6, an adventure score of 7.5, an enrichment score of 3.25, relaxation score of 6, and again, the average ship score of Disney ships at 4.5 with a novelty bonus of 3. That's pretty rocking. Okay, so which one would I say this is the cruise? I don't know which one you would say this is the cruise, but I would say the 7-night Western Caribbean from Port Canaveral that leaves on December 28th. It's after Christmas. We missed the very MERRYTIME theme, but I'm wondering if they're even going to do this on this ship because it's so new. So I don't know. We'll see. It is Disney. They pull out the stops, right? But I just can't get around how great this itinerary is with a 35.25. Even though the maiden voyage cruise the week before scores a 1/4 of a point higher, I just think that the variety that we get here with this itinerary is just better. And that would be the cruise for me. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't liked and subscribed, do that now. I really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. Trying to grow the channel, trying to bring you more content, and it lets me know you're out there. So I really appreciate it. Make sure to check out parts 1 and 2 and 3, and then 5 coming up. Part 1, if you're leaving from the United States and you're in and around the Florida area, that could be an option. Fort Lauderdale has some options as well in this holiday season that may be better suited for you. And with that, I say thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.